And welcome everybody to God's Views on Political News. It's so great to have you back here again this week. Bill, you're looking chipper, as
Really?
always.
I am? Gosh.
It's what I wrote down.
That's what
Tell
you
Bill
wrote
he's
down?
looking
You think
chipper.
well, got a lot of ragweed, so I'm still kind of, but thank you for the compliment anyway.
You're very
Of
welcome.
course,
It's
now
so,
I
it
know
was,
from now on when you say something complimentary, it's in the script. So,
yeah, it's so genuine, Bill.
yeah.
Uh,
Next time I'm
we're
going to show up, you know, see what you have to
we're
say.
seeing Dawn come in right now on Facebook.
Yeah, change the subject. Change the
Change
subject.
this. Get over to the people who are coming in. And I just want to tell anybody who's on Periscope again, if you're having problems on Periscope, as we sometimes do, go over to YouTube. You can find me over there. Teresa says shalom. Dawn saying good day. Jonathan Porter saying shalom, Bill and Susan. Good to see everybody back again this week. Oh my gosh, Bill, we have so much craziness going on in the world that we need to talk about today. So we might as well start with Ukraine, probably everybody's subject. And a lot of people are thinking, why? We just got finished with Russia. Now we're going over to Ukraine. And truthfully, that's kind of what we're doing.
Yeah, well, like I was telling you before we came on, I'm like reading all this about the Ukraine. I'm going, what's the big deal? So you explained it to everyone why it's a big deal.
It's a big deal because it's another distraction for the left. If you want to be honest about that, that's exactly what it is. We have a president of the United States who had a phone conversation with a president of we think it is a president of a foreign country.
I
'Cause we don't
imagine
know
that.
exactly. I mean, that's so
I
odd,
mean,
isn't it?
really, that's just bizarre that the leader of the free world would be on the phone with the leader of another country somewhere. That's just
Yeah.
beyond me.
Well, it's to quote a melodramatic 16-year-old, how dare he do that? So
You're getting
oh,
ahead, Susan. You're getting
I'm
ahead.
getting ahead of everything. Good morning, Kathy. Good to see you. Hello, Beth. Hey, good morning, Nan Joy. Good to see you. We always loved your Southern drawl, Bill. Does Bill have a
What
Southern drawl
Southern
that
drawl?
that pecan
What are y'all
pecan
talking
type?
about? I don't have no drawl. Now,
He doesn't have no Southern drawl, y'all.
if you want to hear me get Southern, I can do it. So
Just get you upset, and you'll probably get more Southern. But we have this conversation, and the reason, Bill, that it's a big deal at all is because they're trying to say, well, you talked about Joe Biden. And that is a guy who's running for 2020 president. You talked about him because you're trying to get information on somebody who's running in the campaign. As they say that with a straight face, they forget all about the DNC Hillary Clinton campaign paying through Perkins Coie, the law firm, Fusion GPS, to go out and write. I was going to say something, write stuff on Donald Trump so they could use it against him in the campaign. And they have the audacity to bring that up as if it's, gosh, we've never heard of this. It's outlandish.
well, do as I say, not as I do, right? So
Well, absolutely.
to the nth degree, at least on their end. Sometimes I wonder that they must really believe what comes out of their mouth. I just find it so difficult to believe that people, even some of these liberal Democrats, could lie with such ease and not have any kind of a conscience. But, so maybe it's that they actually believe these things. I don't know. It's bizarre. But anyway.
It's almost a requirement that you can't have a conscience if you want to be a politician. I mean, isn't that?
Well, I better
Stop at that
right
one.
there.
Me too.
Yeah.
Now, Marlene says hello. Teresa says, I do, but I can't help it. I'm not sure what that was all about. And then Dawn said, isn't that what they all do? Trying to get information on their opponents. And then Jim said Trump doesn't need glasses because he has 2020. And at least he was looking for legitimate stuff. Now, what President Trump says he was really looking for is that he was looking for information on Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, because wanting to know what really happened over there in the Ukraine. Now, this is what's not being talked about in the news, is that Ukraine is saying, supposedly, these are all allegations, but they're saying, we've been trying to give you information now since about 2018 on some wrongdoing that was done during the Obama administration. And somehow we're not being able to get that information to you, Mr. President. So they're having phone calls. They're going to meet sometime this week. And I mean, I already know that's how bad that's going to be. It's going to be like, oh, when he met with Putin, we want to know everything you said. Did you take a breath here? Where did you pause? What, did you give him a look? What, these people are out of control on the left.
Well, I mean, if somebody feels like they're about to be caught in a lie, they want to know what you know.
Exactly.
They want to know how to prep for it. So they're going to press it that he's up to something no good, that Rudy Giuliani was up to no good and trying to get information to use politically. But yeah, I mean, if you know you're guilty of something and the other person's onto it, you want to know what they know, and because you want to try to put them on the defensive. That seems to be what's going on here to me.
Well, now we have a video one that I want Brandon to play. This is Giuliani talking with John Roberts. This can give a little bit more of an idea of what exactly is going on and what the liberals are trying to do.
What, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money.
But Shokin had been heavily criticized for corruption, and it was the United States and a number of other Western countries who said he needs to go.
More relevant.
So was this tied to Hunter Biden, or was this the United States saying you've got a bad actor there because he was accused of corruption in his office, and other countries in the West were saying he needs to go as well?
What does it matter if the son's under investigation? He didn't disclose that. It doesn't the thing strike you? I mean, it's so warped. Doesn't it strike you as strange that he would tell that story and not mention to you that his son's company was the major defendant in the investigation the guy was carrying on? I happen to know, and I've seen the records. Do you know why he was fired? Do you know how the kid was paid? $3 million goes from Ukraine to Cyprus. Ukraine to Latvia. Latvia to Cyprus. Cyprus to Rosemont Seneca. I've seen each one of the wires. When that prosecutor Shokin subpoenaed Cyprus, he got a response. I have the record. They gave him all the information but two people, Hunter Biden and John Kerry's stepson. John Kerry's speechwriter, who was the best friend of his stepson.
The prosecutor who followed.
When that happened, Joe Biden knew that they were zeroing in on Hunter. And he went over there, he got him fired. And the next day, people showed up. And they started working on getting the case for the kid dismissed, as well as the case for Soros. And that's what brings me into it.
Now, you
got to let me finish. You said I went there to get dirt on Joe Biden. Do you know when I found out about Joe Biden? Do you know what I told my colleague? They're going to cover this up. Too bad Biden's involved in this. I got a nice straight case of Ukrainian collusion. The minute I say Biden, that Washington press corps is going to go nuts. They've been covering up for years.
Okay.
And you see at the very beginning there where Joe Biden sits there and brags about the part where he says to the Ukraine government, hey, if you don't fire that prosecutor, I'm not going to pay you your $1 billion loan guarantee. And what they didn't show is he said that the Ukraine government said, well, you're not the president. And he says, well, call him. We're going to push the muscle on you. And it's interesting how John Roberts said, yeah, but wasn't the prosecutor a bad guy and a bad actor and everybody wanted him fired? Does it really matter if that is the case and Hunter Biden is doing something inappropriate? You see how they throw things off and distract?
Well, something I saw several years ago on a trip to Washington, and that is that a lot of these people, a good number of these people, are all buddies.
Yes.
They're all really close pals. And so it's in one's best interest to cover up for the other guy. And that's one thing that I feel like, anyway, that the Trump administration has been doing, whether they intended to do it or not, just by their mere presence has upset a lot of that. Not all of it, obviously, but a lot of that. And, Giuliani is made the case just now that, we've got a clear-cut case here, but you guys in the press are going to cover it up. And why? Well, your buds, your pals. That's my perception anyway.
Well, and then Dawn made a good point. She said, I'd like to know what Hunter Biden's net worth was before Daddy was VP. Because when this Ukraine deal, when he was the director of a holding company called Burisma, over there in the Ukraine. It's alleged that he was making anywhere from $50 to $150,000 a month in this deal, and maybe possibly even more. And it's interesting, but nobody wants to talk about the fact that Giuliani was reportedly, the State Department sent him over to talk and meet with Ukraine to try to, be friendly with them and gain their trust so they could find out more about Hunter Biden. And they met in Spain. So this was not Giuliani and Trump sitting together and in Watergate trying to find out information about Joe. This was trying to get information on Hunter Biden. And it's interesting that Devin Nunes from California, and he's played a big part in helping with the Trump administration. He says that all of these people involved in this, this complaint from the whistleblower. Number one, we're learning that whistleblower complaint is all hearsay. Mm-hmm. That the person wasn't who made the complaint. He heard it from somebody else. And so Nunes says it's funny that these are the same reporters reporting on all of this, are the same reporters from the Mueller investigation that broke all of that news. And he said the story first came out about Hunter Biden during the Hillary Clinton campaign because they were trying to get Joe Biden out.
Yeah.
And so nobody said anything then. It was okay then.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, I remember hearing about this years ago.
Yes.
I mean, as far as Joe Biden himself, I remember back in the 80s when he had launched a presidential campaign. He had to quit pretty early on because it was coming out all over the place about, his lack of integrity. I think it was the main thing back then was some kind of plagiarism or something like that. But it was just obvious back then the guy's, he's the quintessential politician. He'll say whatever he's got to say, do whatever he's got to do to get power. So I don't think anything's changed there. It's just that now he's apparently going senile and some things are slipping out of his mouth that are probably driving his handlers crazy. But,
Well, and this could be, that I don't know who brought this up again. If it was President Trump thinking, well, this will be the way to get Biden out. I doubt it. Biden's doing enough on his own to get himself out.
Yeah.
So I don't think he needs any help. But it's interesting that Nancy, we're all the way, we're back to, well, we never really left, but we're really back to the impeachment talk again. Nancy's supposed to make some big announcement today around 4:00 after she talks to a couple people. But she's given the DOJ, the White House, given them until Thursday, to decide whether or not they're going to turn over all this information about the phone call with the Ukrainian leader, who the whistleblower is, all that information, so Adam Schiff can go out and leak all of it. But it's interesting to note that just about 5 minutes before we went on, Joe Biden's campaign now says they're going to back impeachment if Nancy definitely goes through with it. So that's such great news, right?
Well, on one hand, no, it's not. It's just
It's
very, very disturbing.
ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. And, I hope that the Trump administration will go tell Pelosi and all of them to go pound sand. You want to go with this impeachment, go for it. Personally, I think it'll backfire on them, like most everything else has. But at the same time, this is all they're about. This is all this Congress is about. That's it. Name one thing that they've done other than hold hearing after hearing after hearing after hearing. And, by the way, back to Pelosi and making this announcement, it seems that, the little gal from the Bronx is really one calling the shots
AOC.
here, which is disturbing beyond words that, someone who is so, either she is a sadistic genius or she is a blithering idiot. And I'm not sure which one, and either one is bad. But, she seems to be pulling all the shots where the Democratic Party is driving the narrative, because Pelosi's been kind of, my perception, kind of, where's she been? Like, where's Waldo? And all of a sudden, AOC says this, Nancy's back out on the stage, and she's going to take the reins on this thing. So it's maddening.
Well, not only that, but Ilhan Omar, of course, is coming out and saying, the Democrat Party just isn't progressive enough. We want progressives. We don't even want Joe Biden. He's not progressive enough. We want him out. So
Yeah,
all the pressure is coming on.
yeah.
Speaking of Joe Biden, Jonathan Porter said he's a half bubble off plum. So, and Judy said that AOC is a puppet, and she gets her brains from her former campaign manager and
Yeah.
chief of staff, who's now gone.
Well,
So.
wherever it emanates from, the point is this Democratic Congress has one thing on their agenda, and that is to somehow or another taint Trump so dramatically that somehow or another he goes down the tubes in 2020. It seems to me, that every time they set out to do something like this, it blows up in their face. And it's like I heard somebody say the other day, and it is kind of true. It's like Wile E. Coyote trying to catch the Roadrunner.
Yeah.
Every time he gets this master plan, it ends up blowing up in his face. And frankly, I hope it continues to. And just if for no other reason, just how petty these people are. And these are the people who want to run our country. And some of the most petty people are wanting to be the president of the United States, Joe Biden among them. So anyway.
They want to run the country into the ground. Is what they want to do. I mean, the president was talking this morning at the UN. This will never be a socialist country. That is exactly where they're trying to take this country, into socialism.
Well,
pure and simple.
Yeah, and the real scary thing is, Susan, is that a lot of these 20-somethings coming up, and even some people in their 30s and 40s. I mean, there is a smattering of people in their 70s. In fact, some of them sit in the Senate from by way of the state of Vermont. But anyway, the point is that more and more of the younger people coming up, not all of them, mind you, but they seem to have this socialist Xanadu as this is the objective, this is where we need to go, and we need to get it at any cost. And I predict that the violence that we've seen so far will pale in comparison to what they're willing to do in the future if they don't get their way. They're going to be that rebellious teenager that doesn't get his way and he throws a temper tantrum. But in this case, they'll use weapons.
Well, and while we're talking about that, I'm going to skip over and go right to the UN. Let's talk about the UN. We'll go back to where I was going to go next, to Israel, but I want to go to topic 3. And I want to talk about the climate change this week, because you can't dismiss what is happening, and what is happening with the use of using children to spread this propaganda. And I know there's some people out there who really believe in climate change and all that, but I look at it as a climate change farce, and it's propaganda. And the children are seemingly getting so impacted by it that they're talking about, oh my gosh, I have such anxiety. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm so depressed. I'm, the world's not going to be here. They're even talking about not having children because things are so bad. And they're starting to tell the adults, 16-year-olds are telling adults how to live life now.
Wow, there's so many things I'd like to respond to there. First of all, some of these people who are saying all these things and they don't want to have any children because of it, I'm like, good. I'm good with that. You just let it kind of die out with you. I'm good with that. So I don't know, that's awful to say. I need you to tell you, though, I believe in climate change. I believe it changes every season,
All the time.
All the time. Fall becomes winter, winter becomes spring, spring becomes summer. Right now in the South. Except for this fall, yeah. It's fall on the calendar, but it's not on the thermostat right now. So anyway, but to the point of using children to make this case. First of all, the dad, he needs to be taken out behind the woodshed, as they used to say, and because the parents who would let their children, do something like this and subject them to this, and apparently tell them the world's going to end and you're going to die. You're not going to get to grow up and all these kinds of things. I mean, that's ridiculous. But here's something that I took away from this whole thing, watching all this, reading all the news. First of all, how many 16-year-olds get to go and speak to the UN?
Only the ones that know George Soros and Al Gore.
Okay.
I would think.
So that's pretty odd, wouldn't you say? All
and
right.
speak before Congress too. Don't forget that.
Right. So that's a pretty unique situation. The second thing is, look, I've got a 16-year-old son who, and I know I'm prejudiced, but he's pretty bright. He's pretty insightful. He's got a good head on his shoulders. He sees the world as it is. He looks at things through a biblical lens, and he's pretty politically savvy for a 16-year-old. All right. So that being said, I don't take cues from my 16-year-old son how to run my home and how to run my life. And if I'm not going to take it from my own son, I'll be danged if I'm going to take it from somebody else's 16-year-old. So they can just go fly a kite.
Yeah, well, and they will be flying a kite in your house if they get their way. You know, one of the things that we have to acknowledge here, and I see Marlene is bringing it up. People are worshiping the creation instead of the Creator.
Well,
this is a humanistic approach.
Yeah, exactly. I had pulled up on my phone from Romans chapter 1, exactly what Marlene is alluding to, how that Paul wrote that there was going to come this time that people would be worshiping the creation rather than the Creator. And by the way, I don't want to get off track, but there was something I pointed out to you that some people had taken to praying to plants and things like this, but that kind of falls in line with this. People worshiping the creation rather than the Creator. They've lost their minds. Here's a picture of that story I was mentioning to you. They're coming to these plants, folks, and they're confessing their sins to these plants. I'm sorry. If it wasn't, it's sad, but it's so ridiculous. But that's exactly what's going on. These people, as Marlene said, are worshiping the creation rather than the Creator. And this whole thing at the UN with the social climate and bringing this little girl in and all that, it's a manifestation of that.
It is abusive to use children and to see them get this worked up, to convince them that their life is over, because when Greta spoke, she was saying extinction is happening. You've ruined my life. We're all going to die. People are suffering. People are dying. Entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. I mean, there are people who are on medication because of having these types of thoughts. It's just like everything overwhelming, generalizing, we're all going to die, the sky is falling kind of talk. And yet, when this is seen as, oh, this is absolutely normal, this is fine. Boy, she's intelligent, she's talking to us, and all the adults are sitting there clapping and, woo, great way to go, Greta. I mean, this is abusive. And the thing of it is, the climate change, this is the humanistic approach, and we've kind of alluded to it, and most people know this, but this is taking God out of the equation and saying God didn't know how to do it right. We as human beings, we know better than God, and we're going to tell you that you've got to do something now about climate change, and use that to control everything about what we eat, where we live, if we live in a house or a hut, all that stuff. Yeah. California is a good example of where we're going.
Well, it is. And the thing is, if it takes root in California, which it seemingly has, then it's only a matter of time before it percolates outside of California. And, lo and behold, we'll be dealing with it here in Tennessee as well.
You will be.
Yeah, but I want to go back to the point that was made. This is evidence of what Paul wrote of and what the other passages of Scripture deal with, that people will ignore the Creator and they will begin to worship His creation. And in Romans, Paul says, and I'm going to paraphrase it, he says these people have no excuse. There's no excuse to ignore God. There's no excuse to do all these other things. God's laid these things out in His creation. He speaks through those things. And so if there is a message to be learned from what is going on in the creation, The message is that it's like it was in the days of Noah when things were corrupt in the earth. But it wasn't because of coal plants, and it wasn't because of cars and things like that. It was because of the corrupt hearts of men. And so these people that scream the loudest about climate change and all their socialist and Marxist and communist views, by the way, with one hand they're holding up a placard, Save the Planet, and on the other hand they're holding up a placard defending the right to murder babies in their mother's womb. These are the people who are contributing to that corrupt earth by their corruption. Now, we're not exempt from that, so we're all guilty to some degree of that. And by that I mean what we've done, our corrupt hearts as it relates to what God says is the standard for righteousness. But the people screaming the loudest about protecting the planet are, by their actions, the ones who are destroying the planet. That's the way it works. Now, you're never going to get them to see that.
No.
But that's the way it
Never.
is.
Now, Elijah Joy said, exactly how are you going to fight the climate? Dawn said, why isn't climate change on the forefront when they have more power? And it never is. She's right about that. We don't even talk about it. And let's see. Janet said, that's child abuse for sure. Hello, Michelle Lane from Pennsylvania. Following the Pied Piper over the cliff, and no one seems to care, Jonathan says. Absolutely. And Paul Jones is watching from Illinois. Global whining, Jim and Linda Fleming said. And Dawn said in Switzerland they were at the funeral of a glacier. She saw that. So.
I'm sorry. That's not funny.
It's you have to laugh sometimes. I mean, seriously,
it's crazy.
We've gone over the top.
Hey, Susan, Brandon had this scripture ready. I wanted him, if you don't mind, back up a couple of verses, Brandon. But I wanted everybody to see this, so everybody knows exactly what we're talking about. All right, can you bring that up, Brandon? It's in Romans chapter 1. Therefore, God also gave them up to uncleanness in the lusts of their hearts to dishonor their bodies among themselves, who exchanged the truth of God for the lie, and worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forevermore. Amen. Bring up the next verse, Brandon. Okay, for this reason God gave them up to vile passions, for even their women exchanged the natural use for what is against nature. Continue. All right, there was one verse I was wanting to get to. Go to the next verse, okay? And one more, okay? Well, I thought it was, there was a verse about saying that what I wanted to get to was that professing themselves to be wise, here it is, professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. That's what I really wanted everybody to see. Because they worship the creation more than the Creator, they consider themselves to be so smart. What was this young lady saying? We need to listen to the scientist. Well, professing themselves to be wise, they've become fools. And that's exactly what's going on right now.
It is. Now, Beth Cloud said, we've moved beyond gender confusion and climate confusion and species confusion to all out reality confusion. And Beth, that is so true. There is no base for us to hold on to anymore. If you believe the humanistic approach on the left, you have no base from which to figure out what is real and what isn't real. Let's see, might some maybe be smoking plants before worshiping them, Beth said. And Levon said, not being disagreeable, genuinely wondering if we are to be good stewards of the earth, where do we draw the line? I think we draw the line, Levon, when we start going over into unreasonableness and irrationalness. That's where you have to draw the line. You have to say, why I'm out here worshiping plants. There's a problem here. We don't do that. That's just.
Yeah, I don't want to drink dirty water. I don't want to breathe smog.
No.
I don't want the ground to be incapable of producing a harvest because there's so much, so chemically laden that it can't do anything. I think any reasonable person, agrees that, we need to be good stewards. We need to take care of what God has entrusted to us. There's no argument about that. The argument here is advancing other agendas under the guise of climate change, and that is to control what you eat, what I eat, where we live, where we sleep, who we marry, what we call somebody, and all these other things that have all these tentacles that reach out from this, because that's the bottom line. They want to control every aspect of our lives, and that is the spirit of Antichrist. And by the way, eventually, to some degree, they're going to get away with it, because there does come a day when you can't buy or sell unless you have a particular mark that you have ascribed to their belief and their philosophy, and you uphold the doctrine of the beast. So when is that going to happen? I don't know. Hopefully not tomorrow, but this is where this whole mindset is trending. Yeah.
We're watching it happen and start right now, and that's just the thing now. Levon said, yes, Bill, you're right. And then Yuri said, scientists paid by Soros. And Jonathan said, hearing what their itching ears want to hear. The problem is that we have too, if you take God out of the equation, just want to make this point again, there is no line in the sand, no baseline for what is reasonable. So what's reasonable keeps moving in this humanistic approach. So if you're bowing down and worshiping plants in a world that does not believe in God and is taking God out of the equation, that could be very reasonable. So as Christians, we need to know where we stand, and we need to stay with the principles that we know are reasonable.
I want to say something. That observation you just made prompted this thought in my mind, and I have to take you to Hebrew class to make my point. The Hebrew word for truth, in Hebrew it's pronounced emet, and it's spelled with the letters Aleph, Mem, Tav. Now, if you don't know Hebrew, that doesn't mean anything to you, but just kind of stay with me here for just a moment. Aleph, Mem, Tav. Now, here's why this is appropriate to bring up here. In Hebrew, it's understood that the Aleph, because it's the first letter of the alphabet, is representative of God, because he's the first, he's one, he's the source of all things. So he's represented by that Aleph, okay? So it's Aleph, Mem, Tav. If you were to remove the Aleph from the Hebrew word for truth, emet, if you were to remove God from truth, in other words, the end result would be the letters Mem, Tav, which spell met. And met in Hebrew means death. So you see, there is a way that seems right unto man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. When you remove the Creator from the creation, all you're going to have is death. When you remove the Creator from truth, it becomes your truth, but your truth leads to death. That's just the way it is.
Man, that's, yeah. Ooh. Now, Candace said, I bow down to water the plants. Does that count?
In my garden this summer, I bowed down a lot.
And the plants probably won. I mean, it's so sad. And I have to say, too, we are handing over our children to this. This is handing, and this is just my opinion, we're handing our children over to Baal. To Baal. That's what we're doing. When we have the stuff in the libraries with people dressed up as men dressed up as women,
Do you know what my dad would have done if that had happened in the 70s? Do you know what my old man would have done? He would have gone in there. He would have ended up in jail that day. That's what would have happened. It's unbelievable.
But that's what we're doing. And while you have to laugh at some of it, but it is absolutely, on the other hand, this is, we're watching the transformation, not from, into this fight, the spiritual battle is what we're watching. We really are. Our children are being offered up as sacrifices.
You're absolutely right. That's exactly what it is. Some people will read those passages from the Hebrew scriptures about how they offered their children up to Moloch, and this, you have profaned my name when you've offered your sons and daughters to Moloch. And they would think, how in the world could anyone bring themselves to do that? Yeah. And yet we're watching it happen day in, every day out.
Yeah. Candace said the Pied Piper is playing a strange tune, and people love strange tunes, so they follow the new fad. And people are going right along. And if you say anything against climate change, and like this, especially Greta, this little 16-year-old, if you say anything against her, you're automatically demonized, because you are supposed to get in line and stay in line with this and agree with it and value everything that's coming out of the mouth of a 16-year-old. So,
well, if they don't want me to say anything about her, they just need to keep her hushed, you know,
Yeah.
as far as.
Yeah. And they're not going to do that. She'll be around. She's up for the Nobel Peace Prize now.
Well, that shows you just how valuable that Nobel Peace Prize is.
Exactly. So unbelievable. But, you know, I also wanted to talk about, too, you know, President Trump went in front of the UN yesterday. And I want to play a video that Brandon has. Let's see if I can find it myself. It is video number 2. This is Dr. Jeffress is playing at he was speaking at an event over the weekend, and he talked about
the president does not claim to be perfect at all. He doesn't claim that at all. But I think when you honestly look at his presidency, he has, and I think this is going to be the great irony of history when history looks back, and that is that it took a secular real estate tycoon from New York City to be the most pro-life, pro-religious liberty, pro-Israel president we've had in history. That is the irony of God. And I'm going to ask you to be praying. I know so many of you pray for the president regularly, and he says how much he appreciates that. He says that to me and to others. But pray for him this coming Monday. I'm going to be with him at the United Nations, and it's going to be very interesting. While some are there debating an imaginary problem called climate change, the president, the first leader in history, is going to address the entire United Nations on the subject of religious persecution in the world and the need for religious liberty. First time in history any president has done that. So please pray for the president Monday when he does that. I'll be on Fox Monday night giving a recap on Lou Dobbs and Shannon Bream about what he has to say. But anyway, thank you for praying for the president. I'm very, very...
I just think, you know, listening to that, you can see God's hand in all of what, you know, that is happening in the world. You have, like he was saying, the climate change on one hand, and then the president, the first time in history, going into the UN, and this was before Monday, so he's already been there, who goes in and he talks about religious persecution and religious liberty. That's never been done before. And yesterday, he also dedicated $25 million to protect religious sites and houses of worship across the world, and also announced the creation of a coalition of top business people. This is out of the government's hands, to help protect religious freedom in the workplace. And this is a global call to protect religious freedom. I mean, to me, it gives me chills. It's so good.
Well, the thought that come to mind when the pastor was talking, you know, regarding the president and his admitted deficiencies, there's a scripture that says that God takes the foolish things to confound the wise, which says to me, God doesn't do things the way we think they should be done, how we think they should be done, when we think they should be done. He does it the way he chooses to do it, because then in the end, whether we can discern it right now or not, we'll eventually see his wisdom. We'll see the fruit of his wisdom. And, you know, his thoughts are not ours. His ways are not ours. They are far above ours. And so that's what was coming to mind when he was saying this. But, you know, I really appreciate the fact that the president, with all of his faults and warts and flaws, nevertheless, in the midst of all of this nonsense, as he was talking about, this made-up issue, in the midst of that, he addressed something that's very real, and particularly as it relates to Christians and as it relates to Jewish people, particularly. I know that there are others that are persecuted, but it's not hearsay. It's not made up to state that Christians around the world are right now the most persecuted group of people on the face of the earth. Much more so than LGBTQ people, much more so than transgender people, much more so than all of these other things that the world focuses on. The people who are collectively paying the biggest price for what they believe are those who believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and who serve his son, Jesus, Yeshua, the Messiah. That's what's really going on. And so even though it was a broad stroke in terms of, you know, just religious liberty, Um, I'm thankful that the president is brave enough and courageous enough to address those things. Now, how many people listened? I'm sure that a lot of them, he just fell upon deaf ears. But that doesn't negate the fact that his position, his authority to voice those things, that has an impact, that has an effect. If not in this world, certainly in the spiritual world.
Absolutely. And Kate Ibsen is from New Zealand is watching us today. And she, just to quickly go back a little bit, she said the crowd madness that's come upon the young people is also happening here in New Zealand among college students. I mean, they are calling for climate change, but still rely and carry their cell phones. So people aren't making the connection. Danielle said we are all flawed. Thank God for his grace. Global call to protect religious freedom. That is powerful. Hallelujah. Kathy said his ways are not our ways. Thank God, as Marlene said. And then as you pointed out, Bill. And Jonathan said there's a song with the words, don't dance with the devil. He'll make a fool out of you. You can see he's already making a fool out of a lot of people. And, that's the thing. Again, as we've talked about, when you take God out of the equation, a lot of things happen. A lot of blindness and deafness occurs because you don't have God there. He's hardened their hearts, caused them to be able to see what's happening because they've turned away from God. So.
Well, and like the pastor said, isn't it ironic that God puts a man who is a real estate tycoon, reputation precedes him,
Yeah.
and how he's been he's been very worldly, let's face it. And yet this is the man that God is using to address these things.
I know, it's so great.
It's
I mean, it really is, because think about it. If you had gotten a person who is absolutely perfect, when in the Bible, tell me, other than Jesus Christ, did God ever use a man, a human that was perfect?
He
Name
never
one.
did. He never did.
Never did.
In fact, he makes the point of demonstrating that he chooses imperfect people, but he also makes the point of demonstrating that he perfects those that he has chosen. So he doesn't choose perfect people, but he perfects those that he has chosen. And that's you, me, Donald Trump. The situations that he places us in are calibrated to meet where we are as far as gift and talent, but also weakness, because he uses our gifts and talents to help in that particular scenario, but he also uses that scenario to cause us to grow, cause us to mature. And I'm going to give Donald Trump the benefit of the doubt where his heart is concerned. I don't know it, God does, but some of the fruit that he is producing, at the very least, suggests to me that God is not too far away from his thoughts.
Yeah. And I think that's also too because he is so much surrounded all of the time by people who are trying to keep him on that path with God. And everybody, I would love to have that around me all the time, 24/7. That would be great.
Well, we need to pray for those people.
Yes,
in
we do.
particular. Besides praying for the president, we need to pray for those people who have his ear, that they would give him wise and godly counsel.
Absolutely. And because not everybody surrounds you is always on your side. We've seen that in the Bible.
And not everybody that has pastor in front of their name is going to give you godly counsel. So
that's exactly right.
Did I say that out loud? I think I did.
Now, Demented Gummy Bear said God sent a warrior.
Whoa. What did you just say?
The Demented Gummy Bear is the profile name.
Oh, okay. Right. You lost me. I didn't see that in the notes.
Yeah, I know. You're like, what?
All right. Sorry. So repeat what you just said. I'm sorry. I interrupted.
No, Demented Gummy Bear said God sent a warrior. And he did.
Oh, okay.
And we need, the world needed a warrior at this time to go through everything that we're going through. Jonathan said people get ready for the greater exodus and can't wait to hear the MAGA spin on this Ukraine fiasco, bet for Trump, 66 said. Danielle said, ouch, Bill, when you were saying, when you said something out loud.
Oh, and I said something out loud? Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm still
She's
stuck.
just laughing.
All
She's just laughing.
I'm still stuck on demented gummy bear.
I know. I keep thinking, what's a demented gummy bear? But anyway, you know, one of the things too, I wanted to kind of go on to the next subject, and that is what's happening in Israel, because we are seeing so many prophetic things, you know, happening. And this is one more thing that's happening. As you know, most people know, the elections in Israel, they've not been decided. It looked like for a while that it was Netanyahu was out, that it was over for him because Gantz was ahead by like one seat. We had the Arabs the other day, this, I guess, a group of Arabs that have 13 seats in the Knesset, is what I understand. Anyway, it looked like they were throwing all of their weight behind Gantz, and that would have put Gantz up even more. But they withdrew some names just last night, and now Netanyahu is ahead by one seat.
I have told you many times that when it comes to Israeli politics, I have no idea how they make that work. I mean, it's just incredible. Now, who are we seeing there? I'm sorry. Was that?
That is Gantz.
That's Gantz? Okay.
Yes, it is Gantz.
Okay. You know, I'm not saying this is from the Lord. This is just Bill thinking out loud. I have just always felt that Netanyahu was supposed to be, and he has been there for a long time, but I just have always felt that somehow, some way, Netanyahu was going to be involved in Israeli politics, you know, right up into the end, if you will. And again, yeah. I'm not saying that's from the Lord. That's just my own feelings. So, you know, when the reports coming out, it looked like he was out. I was like, wow, kind of surprised, you know. And then as this thing kind of ticked on, it's like, oh my goodness, this thing is just still hanging out there. I mean, there is the possibility this could go to a third election.
Yeah, and I know the President Rivlin in Israel is hoping that they not put the Israeli people through a third election. It's like, you know, we've got to do something, guys. Let's come together.
I hope they don't put us through that.
I know. Well, and they've been Gantz and Netanyahu met yesterday with with Rivlin. And I think we have a photo of that, photo 3, I believe. And they all met together, and they're coming back, and see, they're holding hands, you know, because that's what
you have to do for the cameras.
Yes. Show unity, guys, and smile.
Right.
And so they're coming back on Wednesday to talk about it more. And at this point, Netanyahu is saying, look, we need to have a unity government. Now, I don't know exactly what that all means, but I know that he was not in favor, Netanyahu was not in favor of like being prime minister for 6 months and having Gantz be prime minister for 6 months. I don't know how you unify when it looks like there's no unity about it.
Well, everything's kind of broken up. There's no continuity to it. So yeah, I would agree with Netanyahu in principle on that one, even if it means that Gantz is the prime minister. But you know, it's when things are this bizarre, and particularly when you're talking about Israel,
right?
You have to stop and you think, this isn't just politics as usual. This isn't just, you know, some weird thing that happened. You know, that this has got the fingerprints of God all over it, and I'm not certain what is going to become of it. You know, I'm not really sure how it turns out, but it's like something's going on here.
Yeah, I don't know what God has, you know, in store by why he's doing this. Is this to wake up the Israeli people? Is this to show them what they have, you know, going to come close to losing? I mean, because you're looking at Israel, it's been very prosperous in the relationship that they have with the United States and how great that relationship has been. How you have Netanyahu saying, look, I am not for a two-state solution at all. And then you have the possibility, what's going to happen with Gantz? Now, people are saying, well, Gantz is not going to have a two-state solution. He's a military guy. He doesn't want that. It's not going to be any different.
Yitzhak Rabin was a military guy.
Yeah.
Yitzhak Rabin was very instrumental in the 6-Day War, and yet Yitzhak Rabin was the one who kind of got the ball rolling with the Oslo Accords and the handshake in 1993. So that doesn't really guarantee anything.
Yeah, it really doesn't. Now, Don said, I've heard that they had a unity government in the past. I don't know what that was like. I don't know the ins and outs of that. I just don't know, again, how you do that. And Renee said Yahweh is in complete control. Danielle said, isn't Gantz a socialist? You know.
Well, look, there are, I don't know, some people, if you've never been to Israel, you might be surprised to discover that there are many, many, many Israelis who are very secular, socialist, and even communist. Beth and I have I wouldn't say he's a close friend or anything, but we had an acquaintance back in the day. He was living over in the States for a good number of years. And he was a very nice fellow, but philosophically, he was a communist, not, the Stalin, Lenin type view that kill everybody and, let's have all the power, but the idea that let's just all live on a moshav and we all put in the same amount of work, we all reap the benefits and the rewards, socialism, communism, whatever. And so that is I won't say prevalent, but it is certainly present in Israeli politics. So, Israel today is just like every other country. It has warts and flaws, and it has people in it that don't think the way we do. Just because they're Israeli doesn't mean they believe the Bible. So that's what you've got going on when you have all these political things taking shape. So bringing it back to Gantz and Netanyahu, I don't know that much about Gantz, honestly. I wouldn't be surprised if he isn't a socialist. I wouldn't be surprised if he isn't very secular. Netanyahu, I don't know how deeply his religious views go, but here's what I'm looking at. I've never been able to get away from the fact that Netanyahu means God's gift. I don't think that's an accident.
I don't think that's an accident either. Now, we have let's see, photo number 2 of Lieberman. And Lieberman is the other one who holds some seats that he could give to either one. And even with him doing that, I don't think that would
well, now Lieberman's in the forefront because it's obviously Netanyahu in the background.
Right. He's in the forefront sitting next to Netanyahu. And this came out yesterday in Breaking Israel News saying that Netanyahu had turned in information regarding that some wrongdoing of Lieberman. So and trying to get Lieberman arrested or investigated or whatever. I don't know if that's true because sometimes the websites in Israel, you don't know if they've got it accurate or not. But it's interesting if they're going to throw this on top of it. Now, I'm not hearing that outside of the one site that I saw it from in Israel. So I don't know, but it wouldn't surprise me. Michelle said, wow, that's cool again, learning wonderful things. And good. I'm glad that we're showing a lot. Because, the truth of the matter is we don't hear much from Israel. We don't get much of that news. We do get from beholdisrael.com and Amir Safati. We get a lot from him, and that's about it.
Well, the news that we get from Israel via CNN and MSNBC and others is filtered in a way that they want us to see what they want us to believe. This is kind of getting off topic just a moment, but on the issue of the news that we get from Israel. I was in Israel back in 1990, one of the many times. I was there actually right before a riot broke out on the Temple Mount, but I went down to the Western Mall Plaza, and there were, just outside of that area, there was a group of Arab children and teenagers who were just kind of standing around doing their thing, minding their own business. And a CNN van pulls up, cameras get out, and all of a sudden these kids grab up stones and rocks and start chunking them toward Israeli soldiers. So I don't know if CNN showed up with some prior agreement with these people, to do that, or the kids saw the cameras and say, "Hey, let's get on camera," and so they started throwing rocks, and CNN starts filming it. What I'm just trying to point out is that American news agencies in particular, and even European news agencies like the BBC, they give the news from Israel as they want you to see it. But when you get to Israel, life on the ground is a lot different. I mean, I don't want to go too far off topic, but let me go ahead and say this while this is in my mind. The news in the United States and in the West would have you believe that the entire nation of Israel is a war zone. And I know this because when we put trips together, take tours over there, you know, the question we always get, is it safe?
Right.
Is it safe to
Exactly.
go? I maybe I'll wait until everything dies down. And of course, my thing is, yeah, it's safe. And if you wait until everything dies down, you'll never go until the Messiah comes, you know? But there are places in the United States. When I've returned from Israel and went through New York, that's when I started feeling, you know, threatened. That's when I
Right.
felt ill at ease. It wasn't when I was in Israel. Because, you know, yeah, there are places in Israel that, you know, a white, blue-eyed guy like me probably don't want to go. But there's neighborhoods in Memphis I wouldn't go into either after dark, and sometimes in broad daylight, just
Right.
because it's not safe to go to those particular places. So anyway, my point was, or is, that the news we get from Israel, unless you trust the source, you have to take it with a grain of salt. And what
Yeah.
the truth that's coming out is filtered out.
Yeah. And that includes some of the sites over in Israel too, I think, because some of them are far left and far right, and they have
Yeah,
their agenda
yeah,
too,
they
just
have.
like here.
Like I said, I deferred to what I said a moment ago. There are a lot of secular people in Israel, a lot of people with social philosophies or socialist philosophies or even communist philosophies. So you have to consider that. Yes.
Sherry said, that is the truth of it, Bill. I've been to Israel several times. Thank you for sharing this truth. I would go to Israel in a heartbeat, Robin said. And the BBC is totally anti Semitic, Kate said. Kate from New Zealand was saying that too. Now, you know, I wanted to also, you had mentioned yesterday that you wanted to talk about a pastor in Tennessee.
No,
Can you talk a little bit?
the governor of
The
Tennessee.
governor. You're right. You're right. You're right. Sorry. The governor, which is, wow. Okay. Yeah. Talk
Yeah.
about him, Bill.
Well, Governor Bill Lee, he's our new governor, has called for a day of prayer and fasting on October 10th. He wants every Tennessean to set aside October 10th as a day of prayer and fasting for our state, and I would say, by extension, our nation. And when's the last time you heard of a chief executive of any state publicly calling for a day of prayer and fasting? When's the last time you heard of that?
Oh gosh, just our governor in California just yesterday, I think, was saying that.
Yeah, well, I
Just kidding.
I just felt like in a day and time when all of the news coming from the political realm is let's push God, let's push prayer, let's push all of these things that are so much part of our national heritage, you know, our biblical heritage. Let's push those things out of the public square. Let's push those indoors behind closed doors. Here we have the governor of the state of Tennessee going out and I say very courageously calling for a day of prayer and fasting. Now he has taken heat for it. You
of
would
course.
expect that he would. So thus far, he stood his ground and he says that he and his wife are going to set that day aside for prayer and fasting. Now here's a footnote to that. What's interesting to me, or even more interesting about that to me, is that the previous day, October 9, is Yom Kippur. And Yom Kippur is a day of prayer and fasting. And so there's going to be a day of prayer and fasting that people like me will observe on October 9th, that Wednesday for Yom Kippur, because the God of heaven is called for that. And then the following day, the state of Tennessee, at least some in the state of Tennessee, are going to observe a day of prayer and fasting on behalf of our state and on behalf of our nation. And I just felt like that people needed to know that.
I think that's so great. Now, Shannon Lopez wants to know, Bill, will you be going to Israel with the group anytime soon?
Anytime soon. That's that's a relative.
It's relative, yeah.
Right. There's nothing planned right now. Thank you for asking. We have we get that question almost every day. Nothing right now.
Now, Robin in Kentucky said our governor has called for prayer many times. Governor Bevin, and Dawn said, what day was that again? That was October the 10th.
October 10th.
Yeah.
That was my mother's birthday. Mom will be turning 87 that day. Yeah, you know what, Governor Bivens has been very vocal about his faith too. So, you know, maybe these two states can get together and kind of form a block of faith that'll resonate out to other states. You know, come on, Arkansas, come on, Georgia, you know, Alabama, all the rest of you. I would throw California in that, but
We'll be praying to the straws on that day here.
or the plants.
And the plants can kind of combine it all. Yeah, our former governor was basically is joined the climate change. I think some commission now between the United States and China.
Oh, you mean Moonbeam?
So, yes,
Oh,
Moonbeam.
okay.
I'm surprised he didn't do it before. Renee said, Susan, are you coming to the Feast of Tabernacles in Tennessee? Probably not. I wish I could. If I could drive there, we're closer, I would.
Well, see, you need to understand, everyone. Susan lives in the People's Republic of California, and she may not be able to get an exit visa.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
you know.
They are watching and listening to this program right now. So after my social media score will probably go down and I won't be allowed out of the.
Really? Well, let me help it a little bit
Yes.
more.
No, Robin said, I'll join in on prayer and fasting for Tennessee. And so everybody else can do that. Now, Telma said she's going to pray for California. Thank you. And pray that we are successful in recalling the governor here in California.
Is that Telma Shaw, by the way? I can't see the
Yes,
comments.
it
Is that
is.
Telma Shaw? Telma.
Yes, it is.
I'm just a moment. I need to tell Telma something.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. You know what I'm talking about. Thank you very much. We very much appreciate you and your husband. Thank you very much.
Now, Telma said she's in California. Telma, we'll have to figure out where you're at. Maybe you're close by. That would be nice. We can commiserate together. Sherry Compton said, I'll be praying with you as well. And hello from Ohio. Eric Payton said, hello, Eric. Glad that you're here joining us today. Well, I tell you, we've gone from one extreme to the other on this show today because that's the way our country is going, one extreme to the other. It would be nice somewhere to meet right back in the middle. Don't think it's going to happen. I do think that our prayer is only thing really right now is going to make a big difference.
Well, that's what's made the big difference from the very beginning. Our faith in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and our faith motivating us to do what he's commanded us to do. By faith, Abraham, by faith, Abel, by faith, Jacob, by faith, Joshua. All these people were motivated by faith. And when those people were motivated by faith in spite of the circumstances around them, and it was always that they were surrounded by evildoers and wickedness and unrighteousness, but because of those faithful people, that remnant of people who believed him and prayed and sought his face, he did miraculous things in their lives and through their lives that affected the entire world, because here we are thousands of years later talking about these men of faith. And of course, all of this is epitomized by the Messiah and his example. And even as he's going to his death, what was he doing? He was praying that the Father's will be done. And that's what we need to do as well.
And that's what we need to do. Absolutely. And that's for the United States, for Israel, and for anything and everything concerned. So, oh boy, I tell you, the time just flew. And it really did. I want to thank everybody for being here. All those that came in later, from Bridget from Indiana. Great show. God bless you both. Always praying for California and our nation, Robin said.
I do pray for you, Susan. I want you to know, even though you're in
Thank
California,
you.
I do.
Thank you. And I appreciate it. And I do need prayers. And that's when I said, if I had somebody surrounding me 24/7 and praying for me, and like the president, I would love that, because I do think that it would be helpful, especially in California, but helpful for all of us. So, but keep the prayers up, and I appreciate anybody who's praying for me. Can honestly say that. So thank you, everybody, for coming in here today. Thank you so much again for your comments and your questions. And until next week, God bless you, and we'll see you again then. Take care.
Shalom, shalom.